Hello everyone, it's your favorite West Virginia on Space here, and it's no secret that I love Scion. It's one of my favorite RPGs out in the world, and so every time I hear a new PDF or book of it has came out, I get my happy dance. I don't own them all, but like I said, I'm always happy to see more. However, I'm not blindly just loyal to everything the game produces. Mostly that this is coming to head with their new book, No Gods, No Masters, which is an adventure book, rather than being as kind of like supplement book. This one's straight up just like a story that your characters play through. However, it involves one of my least favorite elements of all of Scion, that being the Keepers of the World. However, not many people know about them due to their relatively obscure nature, although I imagine that's going to change soon now that they got a whole storybook to themselves. But I want to explain why I don't like the Keepers of the World, why I didn't even like really the concept behind them, and then also, how could they be good? So that's a lot to cover, so let's begin. Now, of course, we must start with what are the Keepers of the World? Well, they come from the Scion Demigod 2nd Edition book. Most notably, they are a pantheon. Now, you may say, Keepers of the World? I don't recall ever hearing about that pantheon mythology, and you'd be right, because they are completely fictional. Well, not completely. All the members come from different pantheons, but the pantheon itself, well, doesn't actually exist. Its most notable members are Imhotep, who I always try to say wrong by accident, and Heracles, but I'm going to call him Hercules, because that's how he should be called. And of course, many others, but I'm not even going to try to pronounce them, so I'll just put their names up here. But regardless of that, is that they're, well, not even technically a pantheon yet. They're trying to become a pantheon, but that gets into their motivations and why I don't actually like them. You see, what they believe that all the titans, the gods, all that jazz, is simply too dangerous for humanity. They are simply too risky, too unpredictable, and so they want to sever the over and underworlds and all that mythical stuff. So there's just the mortals. They just exist in a rational universe with no one to manipulate it. They're kind of cross paths on whether their pantheon's gods will be allowed to control the world after, or if they will also be severed completely. Now, on one hand, I kind of get this, like their motive. A lot of them are Scions themselves, so naturally they understand how petty the gods can be. But on the other hand, it feels very weird to punish all of the different pantheons, even if they never did anything to justify it. Once again, it's kind of like the god butcher from Thor. And coming back to all this, though, I never liked them. I just never did. I didn't really like their section. I just didn't care for them. However, granted, I was hoping they were kind of like the Atlantean pantheon from the Mysteries of the World book, where they would be a non-canon pantheon that you could add them to the game if you wanted, but they didn't have to exist. Unlike the Atlantean pantheon, though, this one was listed as not be. It wasn't like listed saying, "Oh, it's not canon," but like I was kind of hoping it would basically be treated like that. But with the No Gods and No Masters book, yeah, it's definitely not. It's definitely canon. It's definitely a real force in the world of Scion. And I want to get into why I don't like them, but that ends up being kind of a whole section in and of itself. Now, basically what the Keepers of the World are trying to do, in effect, is sever magic and supernatural stuff from the world of mortals and make it a more or less rational, quote-unquote, world like ours, which, foreshadowing. But to get back to that, the reason I don't like that is it's a trope I've seen a few times in stories where, like, they take away magic or the supernatural stuff on a grand scale, and I just don't like it. When I come back, I think the first thing I think of is Star Wars, the Forces of Evil, and we're not getting into the genocide that happened there, but overall, my opinions of the finale, one of them was just like, okay, so now the world is less interesting. There's literally no magic, so now it's just a boring, normal world for the most part, except for a few random things. And I just felt that made it lesser. I've seen other instances of that happening, where like the supernatural whatever gets removed from the world, and I just think it's boring. I think it removes fun and interesting details you can play with. Like, for example, like I think one of the newest events in DC is that a lot of the heroes get depowered, and now they have no superpowers. And like, you know, I can kind of see that as like an issue, whatever. I can understand how that can be a story, but at the same time, it's like, if I want to read a Superman comic, I want to read Superman because he has in part because he has the Superman powers. If you take that away, then why am I reading a Superman story? You know, they can apply this to a lot of other characters. Now, I'm not saying there aren't values in the trope of taking away powers, especially if it's somewhat key to the character or it has a narrative purpose. Like, I'm not saying it's a complete downside if you take away magic or the supernatural from a character or the world. It's a trope that can definitely be done well, but I feel so often it just takes away interesting stuff you can do. Like, for example, imagine the Odyssey, right? Imagine the story of the Odyssey. but you took away all the supernatural stuff. So it's just a guy getting lost on random islands that are not terribly different from each other for the most part. Or imagine Journey to the West, but with no supernatural stuff. Like, some of these plots would just break down without supernatural stuff, but just like try to imagine the most mundane version of it possible. And it just ends up with a lesser story. Like, what would be like the Avengers movie if there was nothing supernatural or superpowers going on? Like, I'm sure you could finagle something, but it would probably be a lot less interesting, especially because the stories aren't designed to take it away. That's what the Keepers of the World effectively do to the setting of Scion if they win. They just remove the story, because now there's no more supernatural stuff, no more Scions, no more gods, no more Titans, no more nothing in effect. So once again, it's a endgame scenario, which I think is rather sad, because one of the biggest tropes of mythology across the world is one story leading into the next, and something Scion plays with very well is how stories can bleed into each other. How easily you could run a campaign of Scion where your characters grow into gods themselves and then have Scions of their own, or they overthrow some god to take their place, and then you play that guy trying to get his place back. Scion is really good at potentially letting you play how mythology has stories interweave with each other. But if the Keepers of the World win, they just shut that down. There's just no more. There's just no more story. It's just mundane world, literally more mundane and normal than ours, which is saying a lot. And so overall, I just don't like them. Not because I hate them as a villain, just because I believe that as a force of, whether antagonist or villain or whatever, they simply make this world less. And having the whole book given to them about this feels, I don't know, I just don't like it. But I'm not a complete sourpuss, and I want to actually give a way I believe the Keepers of the World can be an interesting force in a Scion game. In fact, and go from, I believe, a buzzkill, effectively, to an integral part of a truly interesting story. Simply put, have the Keepers of the World win, but don't have it be in the main story, have it be the backstory. Simply put, have the game of Scion be set in a world where the Keepers of the World have already won a long time ago. Timeline is a relative concept in Scion, just get used to that. And it is a mundane world. It is a normal world like ours, even more so. But something happens. Your characters are given or somehow able to gain magical powers again, become Scions, and it's starting the whole path to power in the game. And there's so many ways you could do this. Maybe you've been chosen to try to rise up the ranks so you can join the Keepers of the World and maintain the order of the world. Or you'd be trying to overthrow them. Maybe either way, you find a way to give yourself magical powers to become a Scion, and now your quest is to overthrow the Keepers of the World so you can rule as a new pantheon. Or you're the last son of Zeus. Zeus' last action on the world was to give you life so you can take up his place. Or you could play the gods of the other pantheons that have gone basically killed or destroyed, now as weak mortal avatars on their quest to regain the position of power they once had. I think that is very interesting for a world you could do. Now, granted, in this saying, the Keepers of the World are effectively the antagonists/villains. However, how much presence they actually have can be variable. They could be simply ruling. The main gimmick is that they aren't going to rule very overtly, even if they are still around at the end. So there'll be more forces in the background, and that slowly become more potent and obvious as you gain in power and pose a bigger and bigger risk to them. Or you can have it be that they cut themselves off too. So now it's a world without any forces, and you're trying to build yourself up to that. Although I think that would be harder to run. If you do need some kind of outside context, maybe the world of Scion just can't last without some kind of overworld forces manipulating it. Maybe it just needs some kind of stabilizing access, or maybe the Cthulhu mythos will slowly leak into the world and take it over, or the dragons will rule mankind again as slaves, and so there needs to be a counterbalance force, and that's what your players do. And if all else fails, maybe some Titans somehow survived it, and now they're trying to wreak havoc, and now you gotta get powerful enough to stop them. Or you could totally play into the politics of it. Maybe a whole bunch of new Scions, whether reincarnations or just new people in general, have all shown up back in this world at the same time, and now they're all vying for power in almost Game of Thrones style way of who's going to get to rebuild their pantheons or start new ones. Overall, I think the Keepers of the World can work if their victory is the backstory, the setup, and then something happens to shift it, and your players end up inadvertently or knowingly becoming the source of a whole new series of adventures. I think there's a lot you could do with that, and truly, I like it. I think it will be fun. In fact, I'm almost human to run that as a campaign, one variation of that idea. Overall, though, that's just my thoughts. What do you think of the Keepers of the World? Do you think they're good? Do you think they're bad? What is the adventure like? I don't actually own that adventure book, so maybe it's the Gray Stay or maybe it's 6. I don't know. Please tell me in the comments. But overall, that's just my thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.